Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and we have another viewer request today, and it's for a two-part horror movie series. So today we're going to start with the 1988 film Waxwork. Here's your trivia question for today. What was used to make the human flesh at the vampire dinner? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So our film starts off with a bunch of rich, preppy college students, which I have no idea why this would have made anyone watching the movie feel anything towards them and actually care about them not dying, but sure, you can go with that as your choice of characters. Now, while walking on their way home, both Sarah and China end up running into a very interesting mansion that apparently actually happens to be a waxwork, and they run into a man named David Lincoln who offers to have the kids come back at night and visit the waxwork for fun. So Sarah and China tell all of their friends about it, and they all decide to come back and make a night out of it. Once at the waxwork, they are greeted by some very interesting servants, but they are allowed in to look at all the wax displays. One by one, each of the kids seem to allow their curiosity to get the best of them as they walk through what appears to be dimensional walls leading into the actual displays. Unfortunately, once they get in, they can't get out, and they are met by some actual monsters. Eventually, it seems to come down to just Mark and Sarah. Will the two of them be able to save their friends, or will the owner of the waxwork be able to sacrifice all the kids? Also, did anyone else ever notice that they gave David Warner's character a very Willy Wonka aesthetic? I wonder if they did that on purpose. This movie was written and directed by Anthony Hickox. He apparently wrote the script in only about 3 to 4 days. Also, he managed to sneak in a cameo for himself as the English Prince. Zach Galligan and Deborah Foreman play the characters of Mark and Sarah in this film. Galligan was hired on due to his work in the movie Gremlins, and Foreman was hired on due to her work on the movie April Fool's Day. Also, before or during this film, she actually started to date Anthony Hickox, the director. Hickox, by the way, took some inspiration for his film from the 1924 German silent movie called Waxworks. Patrick Macnee's role of Sir Wilfrid is the only character I'm aware of that had other actors up for the role. Those other actors were Michael Goff, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Donald Pleasance. Inside of the waxwork, there were 18 exhibits. Do you remember what all of them were? Count Dracula, Phantom of the Opera, a witch, Marquis de Sade, a werewolf, a mummy, a voodoo priest, zombies, an axe murderer, the Invisible Man, Frankenstein's monster, some sort of pod from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a demonic baby, an alien creature, a Cobra Man circus freak, Jack the Ripper, Mr. Hyde, and a golem. Originally, there were also 3 other displays planned: Jason Voorhees, 5 of the children from Village of the Damned, and The Thing. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't get the rights for any of those, so none of them showed up. However, though, Kane Hodder, who had played Jason Voorhees multiple times, did actually show up as Frankenstein's monster, even though he's uncredited. The Body Snatchers pod actually makes a reference to a horror musical, as at one point it says, "Feed me," which is of course a reference to the Little Shop of Horrors. Apparently, some of the vampires had such a huge issue with the fangs staying in that some of the actors would just jam gum into it to keep it in place for the scene. The house that was used for the exteriors of the Waxworks Museum is actually still standing. However, though, the owner actually grew a hedge around it so that it would stop people from taking pictures. The exterior of the house used in the opening scene was also used in the films Willard and Witchboard. The exterior scenes that were used for the werewolf's cabin was actually filmed in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. Also, when speaking about the werewolf, gotta give a little shout out to John Rhys Davies, who played the werewolf before the transformation. So when it comes to the film Waxwork, I do enjoy this one, and I do consider it one of those classic 80s horror films that everyone should check out at least once. Now, that aside though, I will say it's not a great movie, but it is entertaining, and I like the concept. So I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. And if you really enjoyed this movie and can't get enough of it, they did actually make a comic book adaptation of it. However, though, it's interesting. There's a very basic version that's in black and white, and another one that's in color but is in 3D. Other films I recommend watching if you did like this movie are the House series, Cabin in the Woods, the Fright Night movies, and society. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, what was used to make the human flesh at the vampire dinner? So, the dish that China confuses for steak tartare that ends up being human flesh was actually made out of three ingredients: rhubarb, watermelon, and strawberries. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.